All right, this is Rapid Application Development, Lesson 10, Part 3. So we talked about in the last, before the last movie, we just talked about the stream reader and stream writer. But again, for your exam and for your assignment, I want you to get this right. So I've created this file. It's kind of a funny file. It doesn't really do a lot, right? But it's up on Blackboard for you. Let's take a look at it, because I want to look at, and there's actually a couple more of them out there as well, but the one I want you to look at really quickly, and if you want to try and look at this with me, is something called Lesson 11 Stream Writer Open, I think it's Open and Write File, because I want to make sure, oh no, sorry, here it is. Lesson 11 Open and Save File Dialog. That kind of incorporates both the open and save file dialogues with a form. So here's your phone book form. And this time you have a next button and a save button, right? And also an open, save, and exit option in your menus, okay? I've got both the components down here. I've got the menu strip, I've got the open file dialog component, and the save file dialog component, so in here, right? Let's take a look at the code. So if I look at the code, again, I need my system I/O. We need that. And at the top of my class, I've got a few class level variables that I'm using. Okay, one is, we're going to talk about this dirty Boolean in a second when we go into it, right? I've got my phone stream reader, which I'm associating with the stream reader class. I've got my phone stream writer, which I've also associated with the stream writer class. I don't have to do it this way. As an example, once I've opened up my file, and I have my file name, I know I can use my stream writer to save my file name. I already have my file name if I'm working with a particular file. But I'm using it as an illustration how to use both the open file dialog and the save file dialog components. Okay, that's what we're doing here in this particular lesson. So here's my open toolstrip menu item .click, this event handler. And in here I'm doing a couple things. I'm checking to see, I want to see if either of the streams are open. Is my phone stream reader open, or has it been created? If it's already open, either one, I want to close them off. Okay, that's the first thing I'm checking. And then I'm going to build my dialog, and this is where I build my dialog box right here. So take a quick look at this, guys, if you haven't had a chance to. So here I'm building I'm building my file dialog. So I'm building my initial directory. I'm saying my initial directory is directory.getCurrentDirectory. My file name is, I'm giving a default file name, phonelist.txt. The default file name is going to appear for the user. My title is going to be select file or directory for file, right? And then my filter, be very careful when you build your filter. It's text file, space, just like it says here, exactly how it has here. If you add in an extra space here in the filter, it won't work. Okay, if you notice here, I'm looking for a text file as a filter, and here I'm looking for all files. And you can filter for whatever kind of file you're looking for yourself. I'm creating a response dialog result, and it's going to take, I'm going to open up the file and send the user's response into this response dialog result, right? And I'm going to check to see if it's a cancel. If it's a cancel, I'm not going to instantiate it, right? If it's not canceled, I'm going to instantiate my stream reader, and I'm going to use my open file dialog file name. This is the key here. The file name that I get from my open file dialog, I'm going to use it as part of when I instantiate my stream. And if you notice, right, I'm also going to make my next button enabled to true. So I'm not going to allow you to go to the next record when I'm to read from the next record until I know that I've opened up my stream. Okay, and here I'm also going to call up my next button event handler, right, as opposed to writing the same kind of code over and over again. In my next button click event handler, I'm just going to make sure, I'm going to peek ahead to make sure that I haven't got to the end of the file, and I'm going to read in, using my read line statements, both of the fields for this particular record. I'm also going to set this isDirtyBoolean flag. I want you to pay attention to this one. I've got this flag that I set up, and I'm going to set this thing to false. So I'm reading in information. My isDirtyBoolean flag is set to false. Okay. When I'm exiting, I make sure that I close off both of the streams if they're already open, and then I close off my form. I terminate my application. In my Save button click, all right, my Save button click, I want to access the Save Tool Strip menu item. So I'm just using a shared event handler that I'm using here. Okay, so when I go to my Save Tool Strip menu item, .click event handler, again I'm checking to see if I've already got my stream writer open. If it's true, then if it's not equal to null, then I'm going to actually use this phone book save to file custom method. Here it is right here, where I'm going to write. I'm using the stream writer to write to my the name text box and phone text box into my file, right? However, if it's not open, right, I'm going to open it with my Save File Dialog component. And again, it looks very similar to the Open File Dialog. I specify the directory, my default file name, the default extension. I've done that here too. I said my default extension for this one is text.txt, right? My Save File Dialog title, which is Save Your Phone Book, and a filter, which looks it looks identical to the one that we use for Open File Dialog, right? And then my response dialog is I'm also going to take whatever the show dialog gets me from the Save File Dialog, if it's a cancel or a save selection, and make sure that it's not cancel. If it's not cancel, I'm going to instantiate my stream writer, and I'm going to use the file name that I got from my Save File Dialog, and I'm going to append. I'm going to use this true Boolean option here in this signature to append to my file. So I'm going to actually add new records to my file, and I'm not going to create a new file and erase all the records. And then what I'm going to use my phone book save to file method again. Here it is, to write whatever's in my name text box and phone text box. Okay, so I've done that, and here we are. But let's suppose I make a change. Right? And if my is dirty Boolean like my Boolean variable, if it's set to true, it's dirty, as an example, I'm going to ask the user to say, hey, you've got some unsaved information. Do you want to save your file? And if the dialog result is yes, right? Because I'm going to ask him a yes/no. I'm going to create a yes/no message box saying, hey, you know what? Do you want to save? Yes or no? And if he says yes, I'm going to save my my file again, right? If I say no, then I'm not going to bother, and I'm going to close off the file. That's what I'm going to do on form closing. And form closing happens when I click the X at the top of my form, or it happens if I click the exit button and I give it that this.close, and I'm terminating my application. Before my application terminates, it's going to go to this form closing. This event is going to fire. It's going to trigger, and then I'm going to hear this event and respond to it with this, do you want to save your unsaved work, right? But the only way I can do that is if I have this is dirty Boolean, Boolean variable that I'm using at the top, that I'm checking to see if there's anything that needs to be written. I'm also going to create two more events, right? One of them is called the name text box and my phone text box. If the text is changed at all, right? Then I want to say that the is dirty Boolean is true. I want to say, you know what? Something has changed. So if the user tries to exit, right, before he exits, check with the user to make sure he doesn't want to save his work. Okay, that's what I'm doing here. So let's see how this works. So here I'm firing up my file, okay, and this particular case I want to open my file, so I'm going to use my open option on my menu. Take a look, guys. Standard open file dialog pops up, really huge. And if you notice on my filtering, I've set up my filtering so it has text files or all files, right? I've also given it a default file name of phone list text.txt, but my actual file is my phone book.txt. So here I'm going to select that. It automatically changed my file name, and then I can press open. When I do that, my next button becomes enabled, and I can shift through any of the different objects as we move forward, right? If I click the Save button, it's going to open up my save dialog box and say, hey, if I click on this save, it's going to say, do you want to overwrite your changes? Right? Watch. Save. Hey, confirm save as. It already exists. Do you want to replace it? That's built into .NET. I didn't have to program that part at all. So if I try and overwrite a file that already exists, it's going to say, do you really want to replace it, yes or no? Or I can specify another file name and it's going to accept that. If I say no and cancel, now I've canceled out, so I haven't clicked save here at all. If I press, if I make a change to this, because I can type in here, if I make a change like phone John, let's give him a middle name, the man, right? John the Man Smith, right? He's a wrestler, right? And if I say I close it off now, right? It's going to say, whoa, what's happening here? Do you want to save your phone book entry? Because I've made a change and I built this in so that when my text box gets changed, the isDirtyBoolean variable says, hey, you've got a change happening. Check with the user to make sure that he doesn't want to save his file, or else he's going to lose his data, right? And if I say no, it's just going to exit the file, exit the program. And again, if I was going to see that, if I go into show all files and I go into my bin debug folder under my phone book, I've got these two objects here, or two records, Tom, me, and John Smith. But if you notice, John the Man Smith, right? He hasn't been modified. This entry hasn't been modified because I chose to say no. Similarly, that's one option for this particular program that we built. The other one is, I don't want to open it. I want to create a new one. So I say this. I say, let's create another file, and let's call him, Jean-Luc Picard, right? Because it's from the enterprise, and he has a private phone number as well. But we're going to say he's in Toronto somewhere, right? And he's here for the Toronto Film Festival because even though he's an actual character and not an actor, right? He actually exists in real life, right? And we click the save button. We think that Captain Jean-Luc Picard is actually real because we're Trekkies. Click on the save button. It says, hey, it's going to give you my phone book lists. Now, because this is here, if I press save, it's going to say, do you want to overwrite? Because I'm overwriting the file. Or I can make it my own. So let's say instead of my phone book, I can choose phonebook2.txt and click save. And that'll allow that. And now that I've saved it, as an example, I can continue to add in other options. Like, for example, Will Riker. And he's got a phone number in Toronto too. Because even though he's a character, he's real, I tell you, he's real. And I click the save button, and so on, right? And it'll keep saving new entries and it won't ask me to save it won't bring up the save file dialog because I already have brought it up and I've already saved my file. Okay? If I exit, if I actually type something else, let's say in the phone number now, like a random number, 905-777-7777, and I didn't actually add in an entry, and I haven't clicked save, I can just press, if I click this button, isDirtyBoolean is going to be true, it's dirty, and it's going to say, do you want to save? And if I say no, right, it's going to ignore that second entry. If I scroll down now, and let me just go back to here. So here I am. And I show all files. Here we are. I've also got my phone book too. And if you notice, I got a problem. It didn't save my file, right? Why didn't it save my file? Because I said no when I made changes to my file. And it only saves my file if I say yes. If I've changed any part of my file, the way I've written this code, it won't write to it unless I specifically tell it to. Although it did instantiate, it did create the phonebook2.txt file. It's now still empty. So there's an example for you online. I recommend you take a look at it. It gives you all the information, the components you need to create an open file dialog and save file dialog, both for your assignment number 4 and for your exam. Right? So if I'm going to ask you for the exam. This is, if it doesn't work properly, this is where you find the complete solution in lesson 10. Let's go back. So sometimes you have a list box and you want to save the contents of a list box to the file. What you want to try and do is you're going to use the same kind of methodologies we've used up to now. We're going to use for the list box. So this is a good example from a form. We want to save what it's looking at, right? So we're going to read the file into the list in our form load method. We're going to loop through the file until all the elements have been read, just like we did before in our simple I/O. And once we've done that, right, as an example, we're going to use a while loop, by the way, to do that. So if you notice, here's your while loop. And the while loop, the condition statement for the while loop is going to use the peek method of our stream reader, right, to loop through and say, until the end of file, that's what this is basically doing. Keep looping through and read everything into your different strings. So your coffee flavor string, as an example, this is coffee flavors. We're going to keep reading everything into the string, and we're going to add into the combo box whatever the coffee flavor string is. We're going to build that list box or combo box from the file that we're getting, or potentially from a database. So we load it from a database, as an example. We save it to file somewhere because we're going to pass information from one form to the other, and now we're loading it back in, and we're using the items.add method for the combo box to build up that combo box with information that's dynamic that we get from a file. And again, we want to check to see if the file exists, right? And if the file doesn't exist, as an example, then we're going to create the file. And so we're going to do that. We're going to say, try the location. If it doesn't exist, we can open up a new file or exit the program. And here's an example of our saving the file, right? And this is the first time you're going to see this is dirty Boolean option that's in here, right? And again, I recommend that you put some kind of Boolean variable in there. So if the user's added some information in and he's not finished typing things in, or if he's added in a record, but he hasn't saved to the file, or he forgot to save before he closes off, if you don't give him a chance to save, his information will be gone. Whatever he's written from before, if he's added 2 or 3 records, that's okay. But if he chooses not to save, as an example, his information will be lost, just like mine was. So same kind of idea. The other thing that you want to mention here is here we use a for loop, right, to run through the, we're going to write, as an example, different lines, right, that we're going to take from the combo box. So here's our combo box with list items. We're going to look at the index of each item in the combo box, and we're going to write each of these items into the file stream. Okay. So we're doing it. This is the saving the file or adding flavors back to the coffee, as opposed to just reading the flavors from the actual file itself in this particular case. And this is where this, again, please focus here for 1 second. Here's the place I'm talking about this whole time. You want to query the user to save. Hey, I've got this is dirty Boolean that I've kind of described at the top of my file, and again, this is a very common or typical kind of method that people use. If it's true, you ask the user if they want to save. So you set it to true originally. You say, you know what, if something's changed, get the user to save, right? If nothing's changed, right, then the user can exit without any message, right? If he doesn't have to save. And again, every time that allows changes, anything that allows changes, like for example, any kind of add, remove, change, anything to do with the database that you're saving information from a database, if you're adding or moving things around, that's where you want to set this is dirty Boolean to true. And again, one of the main places that I did it in my little example was in this form closing event handler. So just before, because this form closing event handler is going to trigger when you use the Windows close button when you close down your application with an exit, some kind of exit procedure or method, or even if Windows exits. If Windows is exiting, this form closing event handler is going to fire. You can actually stop Windows from exiting with your code, right? And the way you do that is from this form closing event handler that's part of every form, right? So here you say, wait, if my dirty Boolean, if it's true, if it's dirty, if I have to change something, then I'm going to poll the user and say, hey, do you want to make any changes? So that's it for today. You've got your hands-on programming assignment. I was going to try and cover XML as well, but I noticed when I was actually putting things together that this is kind of a longer one. I wanted to make sure that you had time to look at all the different types of I/O. I won't be asking you to do simple file I/O again. I've given it to you just because I think it's necessary for you to have an option to do that as opposed to using StreamReader and StreamWriter. But my recommendation going forward, and if you do more .NET programming in the future, is use your standard .NET StreamReader and StreamWriter I/O. Okay, that's the way you should do it.